Nestled at the outskirts of a bustling metropolitan area lay Oakview Glen, a suburban development known for its neat sidewalks, symmetrical lawns, and tree-lined streets. Houses here had matching mailboxes and carefully trimmed hedges, with a small communal park at the center. Alongside a modest playground, a clubhouse functioned as a gathering spot for everything from baby showers to homeowners association (HOA) meetings. For many residents, Oakview Glen felt tranquil. They'd nod at neighbors while collecting mail, wave at children biking down the cul-de-sac. Meanwhile, the HOA took pride in order and harmony, ensuring property values stayed high. For a small annual fee, residents gained access to the clubhouse, the pool, and well-maintained walking paths. On the surface, life appeared idyllic, until small tensions arose over petty regulations or unwarranted citations. For the most part, people coexisted politely. Even so, faint murmurs of discontent surfaced whenever the HOA enforced obscure rules about lawn gnomes or wreath sizes. Some older homeowners recollected simpler days, while younger families worried about stifling oversight. Still, conflicts rarely escalated beyond quiet grumbling, until one determined HOA board member decided to police the community with near-fanatical zeal. Eventually, her harsh approach triggered a fiasco no one could have predicted, centered on a group of children practicing for a talent recital. Lorraine Barnett, known privately by her neighbors as Karen, was in her late 40s, with a precisely trimmed bob of mahogany hair and a penchant for pastel suits. She had moved to Oakview Glen a few years earlier, quickly ingratiating herself with the HOA board. Officially titled the Community Standards Liaison, she loved reminding folks that she was only enforcing the rules. Yet the frequency and intensity of her complaints hinted at a deeper need for control. Whenever she walked the neighborhood, clipboard in hand, phone camera at the ready, residents found themselves tensing. A child scooter left near a driveway could prompt a typed warning on official letterhead. A slightly overgrown shrub might earn a notice about visual uniformity. Locally, people half-joked about Karen sightings, akin to wildlife alerts, cautioning each other to tidy front yards. For her part, Karen believed she was safeguarding Oakview Glen's aesthetic. She insisted that any small breach of policy could harm property values. Over time, her fervor stretched from property exteriors to personal activities. She'd fuss about basketball hoops, rummage sales, and even kids' lemonade stands, labeling them nuisances or unapproved business ventures. The board occasionally reined her in, but too often let her zeal go unchecked. Karen seized that leeway to interpret minor infractions as major threats, leading, in time, to a bizarre confrontation with families hosting a children's talent recital. That fiasco would revolve around microphone cables, stage lights, and the moment when a group of bright-eyed kids, some with wheelchairs or assistive devices, suddenly found their voices stolen. No one foresaw that the meltdown over proper usage of clubhouse tech would spark a wave of solidarity across Oakview Glen. The impetus for the talent recital stemmed from a group of parents who believed in giving all children a chance to shine, especially those with disabilities. They'd noticed how mainstream events sometimes overlooked kids who use wheelchairs or face learning challenges. So these parents approached the HOA about hosting a Kids Special Talents Day at the clubhouse. The plan was to let children, particularly those with disabilities, perform music, recite poetry, or display artwork for friends and neighbors. The board approved the event unanimously, Karen included, though she grumbled about scheduling. Her official reason for hesitation was potential disruption. But the rest of the board saw the positive. It would be a chance to showcase the clubhouse as a community hub, with a small stage already present. Plus, they could collect optional donations for local charities aiding kids with special needs. Everyone seemed excited. Families started organizing. One mother, Serena, volunteered to coordinate sign-ups. Another father, Miguel, offered to handle refreshments. They posted flyers around Oakview Glen, encouraging neighbors to attend. Among the participants were children who used hearing aids, others who had developmental delays, and some with visible mobility issues. Each child had a different skill: singing, dancing, comedic acts, or simple show-and-tells. The event promised a heartwarming afternoon of applause and positivity. From the start, though, Karen's presence loomed. She criticized minor details: the kids' stage time length, the potential safety hazards of wheelchair ramps, or the wattage of the stage lights. At first, no one suspected she'd sabotage the entire show. Parents chalked her negativity up to her usual controlling ways. If only they'd known how far she might go to avoid an amateur fiasco, they would have prepared for an unprecedented act of vandalism. As the talent recital approached, Karen's annoyance with the entire concept grew. In her mind, the clubhouse was meant for official HOA gatherings, board meetings, adult workshops, or perhaps tasteful holiday parties. She viewed a child-focused event, especially one featuring kids with various disabilities, as something that could tarnish the clubhouse's professional image. More than once, she muttered on the HOA online forum about the chaos of children running amok in the building. Moreover, Karen despised that the other board members ignored her concerns about wear and tear. She insisted that letting so many children in wheelchairs in at once would scuff floors, damage fixtures, or create noise complaints. The board assured her that parents would supervise. They pointed out that an inclusive, supportive environment was precisely what Oakview Glen valued. Though outwardly abiding by the majority's decision, Karen harbored resentment, fueled by her belief that the recital was an unprofessional circus. She dreaded the day of the show, picturing squealing kids, spilt drinks, random squeaks from hearing aids, or feedback from the microphones. Her frustration escalated each time she passed a poster reading, "All are welcome. Kids Special Talents Day." By the final week, Karen's work on the event turned subversive. She insisted on controlling the clubhouse schedule, ordering that the families couldn't rehearse until the day before. She demanded background checks for volunteer staff, causing last-minute chaos. But the parents persisted. They overcame each obstacle, fueling Karen's conviction that she needed a more direct approach to prevent a disaster. No one realized that her notion of preventing disaster would manifest in literal sabotage. Despite Karen's complaining, official communications from the HOA mostly endorsed the event. Emails reminded residents to attend, praising the families who organized it. The board arranged for extra folding chairs, a small refreshment table, and a simple stage setup with mic stands. They even rented a modest sound system so performers could be heard clearly in the large clubhouse hall. Behind the scenes, some neighbors observed Karen closely. They noticed her abrupt questions about the sound system's location or which vendor supplied the cables. She seemed particularly curious about the power sources. Others found it odd, but didn't dwell on it. Maybe she was checking compliance with electrical codes, they thought. If only they had understood she might physically tamper with the gear, they might have locked the equipment away. Meanwhile, the kids were thrilled. Children practiced their acts in living rooms or backyards. A 9-year-old with cerebral palsy rehearsed a dance routine using her walker. A boy with a stutter practiced reading a poem about bravery, and siblings performed a short comedic skit. The parents, touched by the kids' enthusiasm, looked forward to cheering them on. They printed programs and made sure volunteers would guide kids on and off stage. Karen, for her part, quietly seethed. She was determined to keep the event under control. The board had refused her request for a professional stage manager. They'd turned down her demand that each performance be reviewed in advance for quality control. In her mind, the stage lights, microphones, and cables would lead to chaos or amateurish embarrassment. More than once, she told acquaintances that someone needed to do something if the show threatened the clubhouse's integrity. Few took her seriously until the day arrived. The morning of the recital dawned bright and mild, with a gentle breeze drifting through Oakview Glen. Parents arrived early to set up the clubhouse, greeting each other with excited smiles. They covered a folding table with a colorful cloth for refreshments, set chairs in rows facing the small stage, and tested the microphones. A local bakery donated cupcakes, which volunteers arranged neatly by the entrance. Children trickled in, some wearing costumes or holding instruments, ready to do their best. Amid this excitement, Karen lurked. She hovered near the front desk, checking sign-in sheets or rummaging through a box of extra cables. She claimed to be helping, but mostly she observed with a sour expression. When asked if she'd watch the show, she demurred, saying she might come by to ensure no safety risks occur. A few parents felt uneasy at her presence, but tried not to let it spoil the atmosphere. As time approached noon, the crowd grew. Grandparents rolled in with cameras. Neighbors without kids came out of curiosity, and a handful of older teens took seats near the back. The stage lights flickered on, tested for brightness. The mic stands stood near the front, 3 of them, each connected to a mixer hidden behind a curtain. Everything seemed in order. The families busied themselves lining up the acts. Karen slipped away, phone in hand. Some might have guessed she intended to voice more complaints. In truth, her frustration had peaked. Looking at the cables, she'd formed a plan. If the microphones lost power, the entire show would grind to a halt. In her twisted logic, that might prevent an amateur fiasco from tarnishing the clubhouse. She rationalized that an abrupt end could force the board to see her point about the dangers of letting random events flourish. Her final push for sabotage was minutes away. At 1 p.m., the recital began. Families took their seats, forming a small audience of around 50 people. Kids clustered backstage, some fidgeting with excitement or last-minute nerves. The first act featured a young girl singing an a cappella tune. Though her pitch wavered, the crowd applauded encouragingly. Next came a boy reading a short story he'd written, nervous at first, but beaming when his words earned cheers. Karen stood in the side aisle, arms folded. Each time a wheelchair rolled across the stage or a child used a cane, she frowned. The applause struck her as over the top for what she deemed subpar performances. She began pacing, as if itching to intervene. But everything ran smoothly. The lines on stage were neat, the wheelchair ramp stable. The audience smiled at each child's bravery, overshadowing any trivial mistakes. Partway through, a child who relied on a crutch approached the mic. She introduced herself, explained she had a mild speech impairment, and asked the audience's patience. They responded with warm applause. Karen rolled her eyes. The child began reciting a heartfelt poem about acceptance, her voice quivering yet determined. This heartfelt moment was precisely the sort of sappy display Karen had dreaded. She fumed that the show turned into a sentimental demonstration. Stepping away from the main hall, Karen crept toward the stage's backstage area. She knew the main cables for the microphones fed through a side corridor, hooking into the clubhouse's main power outlet. The kids were about to use pre-recorded music on the sound system, which also depended on those cables. If she severed them, the audio would cut out abruptly. In her mind, that would end the amateur show, saving the clubhouse from further embarrassment. She could claim it was a freak malfunction. Anyone might suspect old wiring or an overloaded circuit. Karen found the storage closet behind the stage. Inside, the main mixer rested on a rolling cart, multiple cables snaking to the speakers and microphones. She glanced around to ensure no one watched. The corridor was deserted, as all volunteers were front of house, enthralled by the children's acts. Perfect timing, she thought, heart pounding. She rummaged until she located the cable that fed power from the wall to the mixer. It was thick, black, and easy to identify. A large label read Main PWR. Another cable connected the microphones. Karen realized she needed to sabotage more than just the power cord. Someone could simply plug it back in. Instead, if she physically cut the cables, the show might be forced to stop entirely. She patted her purse, producing a small pair of wire cutters she'd brought just in case. With trembling hands, Karen snipped the main power cable in a single motion. Sparks flicked, though minimal. Then she turned to the mic cables, quickly slicing through them. The severed wires fell limp, their insulation parted. A jolt of adrenaline shot through her. She'd done it. The entire audio system would crash. She stuffed the wire cutters back in her purse, her breath shallow. An instant flash of regret or fear might have flickered. She knew this was severe sabotage, but she rationalized it as necessary. Composing herself, Karen left the closet, shutting the door quietly. She planned to slip into the audience, feign surprise when the sound died. Then, likely, the show would end. She'd disclaim involvement, spinning it as faulty equipment. The fiasco might shame the board into rethinking future talent recitals. Satisfied, she re-entered the main hall, just as the next act stepped forward on stage. Up front, a boy named Elijah, who used a wheelchair, was about to perform a short rap number. The music track cued, audible through the speakers for a split second, then static. A crackle, and abruptly, silence. Confusion rippled through the audience. Some craned their necks to see if the boy would speak. But his microphone was dead, the system lifeless. Elijah tapped the mic, perplexed. His father, assisting backstage, rushed over to check connections. Meanwhile, the next child, who was supposed to accompany with sign language, blinked in confusion. The applause that had accompanied each act petered out into a hush of uncertainty. Parents and volunteers scurried around, looking for the cause. The stage lights remained on. Only the audio system had died. The hush stretched, pregnant with tension. Children fidgeted, worried they'd done something wrong. Among the watchers, Karen feigned surprise, lifting her eyebrows as if to say, "Oh dear, what a technical malfunction." When a volunteer crouched behind the stage to check the mixer, she gasped. Cables were clearly cut. Not just disconnected, but severed. She emerged, whispering frantically to other helpers. The parents' eyes widened in disbelief. A wave of anger and confusion swept across them. One father asked, "Who on earth would cut the cables? Is this sabotage?" Elijah, on stage, could see the commotion. The boy's excitement turned to heartbreak. He tried to speak up, but no one could hear him beyond the first few rows. Serena, the event coordinator, grabbed a spare mic from the side, but it, too, was unresponsive, connected to the severed line. The entire audio system was useless. The audience grew restless, buzzing with speculation. "Technical glitch?" someone asked. "No, the cords are actually cut," a volunteer hissed. That single revelation ignited a new wave of murmurs. Why would anyone do that? Is it an accident or sabotage? Meanwhile, Karen sat stiffly. She realized the sabotage was discovered. Her stomach lurched, but she maintained a mask of confusion. Another parent glared at her, suspecting foul play. Amid the tension, some parents refused to let the show fail. One mother, who'd helped with staging, recalled that a local sponsor had donated a few battery-powered microphones for an earlier event. They were older, less powerful, but they didn't require the main power. She whispered to a friend, "If we can find those battery mics in the storage closet, maybe the kids can keep performing." They sprang into action. While a small group distracted the audience with jokes or short announcements, two parents dashed to rummage in the clubhouse's supply room. After frantic searching, they unearthed the battery mics, slightly dusty, with small attachable transmitters that used separate frequencies. Another volunteer realized they could run the miniature mixers on battery packs stashed from a prior fall festival. It was makeshift, but it might work. Within minutes, they rigged a hidden alternate system behind the curtains, connecting the battery mics to small portable speakers. This gear wasn't as loud or robust, but at least it offered a functioning microphone. Quietly, they tested it in a corner. A faint but audible amplification emerged from the portable speaker, perfect enough for a small room. Meanwhile, Elijah waited on stage, anxiety etched on his face. The crowd had grown uneasy. Some suspected sabotage. Others wondered if the show was canceled. Then, suddenly, a volunteer stepped out, holding a cordless mic. He addressed the audience. "We're sorry for the interruption. We've had a technical issue, but we have backup mics, so the show can go on." The room erupted in relieved cheers and applause. Children in the wings breathed sighs of relief. Elijah accepted the new mic, tested it with a timid hello. The small speaker in front played his voice with a slight echo, but it was audible. The parents beckoned the music track again, this time from a battery-powered boombox near the stage. The rap track began, and Elijah performed while the crowd hooped. The sabotage had failed to end the recital. Among the watchers, Karen stiffened, eyes darting. She hadn't anticipated a plan B. Her sabotage had been circumvented. That knowledge both enraged and alarmed her. But the audience's delight overshadowed any suspicion about who had done the cutting. Karen realized, though some parents already suspected her, her moment of victory was rapidly collapsing into a looming confrontation. With the battery mics in play, the recital resumed. Each child overcame the unexpected glitch, buoyed by the crowd's support. The hidden portable speakers provided enough volume for small solos, comedic sketches, and group dances. Though the sound wasn't perfect, the audience compensated with extra cheers and respectful silence while each child performed. The sense of camaraderie soared, overshadowing the uneasy knowledge that someone had tried to sabotage them. Once the final act concluded, the families gave a standing ovation. Children, some beaming with tears of joy, took bows. The sense of triumph felt even sweeter because they'd triumphed over adversity, and not just the usual stage fright. Word spread swiftly that the main cables had been deliberately cut. Furious whispers singled out Karen as the prime suspect. "She's always hated this event," muttered one father. Another insisted, "We saw her lurking near the backstage earlier." Karen, sensing the hostility, tried to slip out quietly, but a group of parents intercepted her in the hallway. Serena confronted her. "We know you were near the cables. Did you do this?" Karen tried to feign ignorance, stammering about poor wiring. But her stiff demeanor, combined with previous statements, made her look guilty. Another parent, brandishing phone snapshots of the severed cables, demanded she explain. Karen simply repeated, "I have no clue what happened." Though lacking a direct confession, the crowd's anger boiled. One mother threatened to involve the police. A father snapped that he'd press charges for vandalism. The board president, who had attended the event, arrived just then, shocked to hear about the sabotage. He tried to calm everyone, promising an immediate investigation. Karen, face reddening, insisted she'd done nothing, but the defiant glint in her eyes suggested otherwise. As parents parted ways, they vowed to file formal complaints with the HOA, demanding Karen's removal from the board. The scene ended with Karen storming out, her expression a mix of fury and fear. Meanwhile, children left the clubhouse proud of their perseverance, though they, too, realized a grown-up had tried to silence them. A baffling cruelty that overshadowed the day's success. Over the next few days, Oakview Glen buzzed with talk of the Recital sabotage. Residents who had shrugged off Karen's pettiness realized she'd escalated to physically damaging property. Many recognized the act as an attack not just on the event, but specifically on disabled kids who needed that microphone for their big moment. Outrage flared across the community's social media page. Posts labeled the sabotage heartless and despicable, with calls for accountability. The board convened an emergency session to address the fiasco. Families presented evidence, including witness accounts of Karen skulking around backstage, plus the suspicious cuts on multiple cables. While no security cameras caught her red-handed, the circumstantial evidence was overwhelming. The board's president, uneasy about possible legal repercussions, pledged full cooperation with any law enforcement inquiry. He also apologized to parents, reaffirming that the HOA hadn't sanctioned Karen's actions. Many neighbors rallied around the families. They brought small gifts or encouraging notes to the children. The board planned a follow-up event to celebrate the kids' talents again, this time with a better sound system and donated battery mics from a local sponsor. Some joked about installing Karen-proof cables, but in truth, the sabotage had awakened a powerful sense of unity. If one misguided board member could try to silence them, they'd respond by ensuring no child was ever again left in forced silence. Karen, meanwhile, faced a wave of condemnation. She retreated, rarely venturing outdoors, rumored to be consulting a lawyer. Some speculated she might attempt to spin the story, but the damage was done. Her meltdown ironically forged a collective determination among neighbors to defend each other's rights, especially the vulnerable. The seeds of an inclusive, supportive community had been sown more strongly than ever. The HOA investigation advanced, culminating in a special board meeting where members deliberated on disciplinary measures. Officially, the association's bylaws allowed for suspension or removal of a board member who engaged in unethical or damaging behavior. The parents, armed with statements from volunteers who'd seen Karen in the hallway near the cables, pressed for maximum penalties. They also argued that, whether or not they could prove it in criminal court, Karen's repeated hostility toward the event made her the prime suspect. Karen attended the closed session but provided no compelling defense. She rehashed vague claims about faulty wiring, ignoring the fact that multiple cables were physically cut. The rest of the board, reflecting public sentiment, voted to strip her of any enforcement privileges and recommended her resignation. She refused to resign, but was effectively sidelined. The board threatened a formal recall vote if she wouldn't comply. Additionally, the HOA decided to impose a monetary penalty for vandalism, citing the cost of replacing the cables and renting alternate audio equipment. The exact figure overshadowed Karen's monthly board stipend. Publicly, the board labeled her sabotage an egregious breach of trust, issuing a statement that acts targeting children's accessibility or performance are beyond the pale of community values. Though some might have demanded immediate expulsion from Oakview Glen, the association lacked the power to force her out as a homeowner. However, the wave of disapproval effectively isolated Karen. Where once neighbors simply tolerated her meddling, now they actively shunned her. She found herself persona non grata at gatherings, with people refusing to greet her on the sidewalks. Over time, rumors spread that she might sell her house and move. Whether she did or not, her reign of petty terror had ended. Despite the initial shock, the families who organized the talent recital refused to let sabotage define their children's experience. With the board's blessing, they planned a follow-up show, a second chance for any child who felt rattled by the abrupt audio failure. This time, they tested brand-new equipment with dual backups, a standard system, and multiple wireless mics powered by large battery packs. They even invested in hidden cables protected by discrete covers. The stage was set for a triumphant encore. The second show, held a month after the sabotage, drew a bigger crowd. Word of the fiasco had spread, and many curious neighbors now attended out of solidarity or simple curiosity. Kids wore the same costumes or brand-new outfits, excited to reclaim the spotlight. Families sat in a supportive hush, cherishing each performance with heightened appreciation. This time, no meltdown interrupted them. The new equipment worked flawlessly. A short comedic routine from a boy with autism brought laughter. A piano duet by two siblings, one using a walker, earned a standing ovation, and a sign language choir by a group of deaf children left many in tears. The show concluded with a group rendition of a popular pop song, each child singing or playing an instrument. Applause thundered. In that moment, it was clear that Karen's sabotage had ultimately strengthened the community's resolve. The kids not only performed well, they showcased the resilience of Oakview Glen. Freed from the fear of sabotage, the atmosphere felt triumphant. Even board members who had once tolerated Karen's strictness admitted that encouraging these inclusive events was far more beneficial to the neighborhood's spirit than any repressive measure. Over time, Oakview Glen settled back into a tranquil suburban routine, albeit with a renewed sense of unity. The children's talent shows became an annual event, each year welcoming more participants, from aspiring teen singers to younger kids excited to share new hobbies. The board recognized the need for a more formal, inclusive policy to ensure all residents, including those with disabilities, felt welcomed at the clubhouse. Karen, stripped of official influence, faded from daily community life. Though she continued to reside in Oakview Glen for a while, her presence no longer induced the same intimidation. People recognized that her sabotage had ironically spurred a stronger bonding among neighbors, particularly the families who discovered their collective power to adapt and overcome. She occasionally posted on the HOA forum, decrying lax standards, but garnered few responses or support. As for the children who performed that day, the memory of cables cut in the darkness gave way to recollections of heroic parents swiftly producing battery-powered mics from behind the curtains, ensuring the show continued. The kids often repeated the story. "We thought we lost our voices, but then we found another way." It became a local legend illustrating creative problem-solving in the face of adversity. And so, Oakview Glen moved forward, with front lawns still neatly trimmed, mailboxes aligned, and a robust sense of empathy guiding its events. The sabotage attempt remained a cautionary tale, reminding everyone that, no matter how strict or petty an individual might be, the collective goodwill of neighbors who care for one another can prevail. The abiding lesson: a microphone cable might be cut, but a community's voice, once galvanized, is never truly silenced. From the day Karen cut those cables in secret, hoping to end a messy, amateur show, she instead sparked a wave of compassion that anchored Oakview Glen's families more strongly together. Her sabotage ironically led to new, creative solutions, like battery-powered microphones, hidden wires, and a network of supportive parents who refused to be silenced. And, in turn, the children's talents shone brighter than ever, echoing a simple truth: in a caring community, everyone has a chance to be heard.